The day the transfer order to Chicago finally came through, Clara had been ecstatic, eager to call her husband, Arthur, with the good news. Instead, he had demanded she surrender her hard-earned position to Sarah, the widow of his fallen comrade. In her past life, Clara had fought bitterly with him over the phone, clinging to her transfer and moving to the city. Left behind at the rural plant, Sarah was later assaulted by a local gang. Broken by the trauma, she drowned herself and her 5-year-old son in the town reservoir. Arthur blamed Clara for the tragedy, refusing to so much as look at her for the next 30 years. His bitter refrain echoed through the decades. Clara, if you had just given her the spot, she wouldn't have died. Even on his deathbed, his final wish was a cruel twist of the knife, leaving strict instructions that they were not to be buried in the same plot. Consumed by depression, Clara passed away a year later. Then, she opened her eyes right back to the day the transfer order arrived. Through the phone receiver, Arthur's earnest voice would plead, "Sarah is a single mother. It's not easy for her. Just let her have this transfer first." But this time, Clara wouldn't let him finish. She would simply say, "I agree," and immediately file for divorce. In this life, she absolutely refused to waste another breath trapped in his shadow. Clara. Director Robert Miller rapped his knuckles against her desk, waving a thick envelope with an official red seal. What happens when you sacrifice it all for a toxic husband? Rebirth. Watch our badass female lead drop the dead weight and walk away, leaving him drowning in regret. A broad smile stretched across his face. What are you spacing out for? Your transfer to Chicago is officially approved. You and Captain Vance won't have to live apart anymore. Clara's gaze dropped to the crisp document. Staring at the stamped date, a violent shudder ripped through her body. She had actually been reborn. On this exact day in her previous life, she had been overjoyed, believing their painful 3-year long-distance marriage was finally over. Yet, the moment the paperwork cleared, Arthur had called, insisting she hand her future over to his comrade's widow. That initial betrayal had felt like a physical blow. Her refusal and subsequent move to the city had been the catalyst for a lifetime of misery. Bring! The shrill ring of the office telephone snapped Clara out of her suffocating memories. Director Miller casually picked up the receiver. "Hello, Liberty Manufacturing Administrative Office. Oh, Captain Vance, good to hear from you." Yes, the transfer just came through. I was just telling Clara the good news. You want to speak with her? Of course. Hold on a second. Covering the mouthpiece, Miller shot Clara an exaggerated wink. It's your husband. He's definitely calling to congratulate you. Clara took a slow, steadying breath, stood up, and took the receiver. Hello? Arthur's painfully familiar voice crackled over the line. Clara, he began, pausing as if carefully weighing his next words. The plant management told you about the transfer, right? Well, here's the thing. His pace quickened, laced with a demanding edge that left no room for argument. Sarah's kid is about to start elementary school. It's too much for a single mother to handle heavy manual labor on the factory floor. There happens to be an open logistical position here in the city. He stopped for a fraction of a second, his tone hardening. Clara, you're highly capable and technically skilled. Even if you don't come to Chicago this time, you'll still be highly valued at the local plant, Skill. Let Sarah take this spot first. Consider it a favor to me. I'll make it up to you later. It was the exact same script. In her past life, those words had shattered her. She had sobbed into the receiver, screaming, Arthur, why should I? I am your wife. We've been married for 3 years and haven't even spent 3 full months together. All you care about is your comrade's widow. What am I to you? In her past life, his response had been a frigid, Clara, you are simply being unreasonable. But now, gripping the telephone receiver, Clara felt nothing but an absolute, icy calm. Clara, are you listening? Arthur's voice dropped an octave. I'm not discussing this with you. I'm telling you. I've already cleared it with the board at regional headquarters. She lowered her gaze to her fingertips, calloused from years of gripping drafting pens and etching tools. Fine, she breathed, the single syllable slipping out effortlessly. Dead silence blanketed the line. It took a full 5 seconds for Arthur to process the lack of resistance before he stammered, What did you say? I said she can have the transfer. You don't owe me anything, and you don't need to make it up to me. Clara kept her voice steady. Because I don't want you anymore. Arthur froze. He had armed himself with a barrage of arguments to suppress her inevitable outburst, bracing himself for tears and screaming. Yet that airy, indifferent agreement sparked an inexplicable flash of irritation in his chest. It's good that you're being reasonable. He cleared his throat, scrambling to reclaim the upper hand. Don't worry. I'll request a few extra days off around the holidays to come back and see you. If you need anything, just write to me. I'll mail it down from Chicago. There's no need. Clara cut him off. I have work to do. Goodbye. Without giving him a chance to utter another word, she slammed the receiver down onto the cradle. Director Miller, who had been listening in utter confusion, jolted as the phone clicked. What on earth was that about? He asked urgently. Clara turned to him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Director, please inform the regional board that I am voluntarily giving up my transfer to Chicago. Let Sarah from Sector 2 take the position. Are you out of your mind? Miller sprang from his chair. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Do you have any idea how many people are gunning for that spot? You're giving it to Sarah? The woman barely finished middle school. What exactly is she going to do at headquarters? You don't need to talk me out of it, Director. My mind is made up. Clara slid the red-stamped envelope back across the desk. Her eyes were clear and utterly resolute. Processing the transfer reassignment took about a week. Within days, Liberty Manufacturing erupted into a frenzy of gossip. Whispers followed Clara down the corridors, with people marveling at her willingness to hand over such a golden ticket. Others hissed about Sarah's supposed cunning, marveling at how a widow could manipulate a high-ranking officer into completely throwing his own wife under the bus. Clara ignored every word of it. At 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, Gary the postman rolled his battered green bicycle to a halt outside the administrative office. Clara, got a package for you, he bellowed. Postmarked Chicago. It's a heavy one, too. Envious glances darted across the office. Oh, that has to be Captain Vance sending a peace offering, Brenda remarked, her tone dripping with sour grapes. You might have lost the transfer, Clara, but your husband clearly still cares. A box that size? Must be packed with luxury goods. Clara walked out to sign for the delivery. It was indeed massive, a heavy, tightly bound burlap sack bearing Arthur's bold, aggressive handwriting. Fetching a pair of heavy shears from her desk, she expressionlessly snipped the thick twine sealing the top. She peeled the burlap back, exposing the contents. 2 tins of imported malted milk powder, 3 bolts of brightly colored, high-end synthetic fabric, a massive bag of gourmet caramels, 2 pairs of genuine calfskin loafers for a little boy, straight from a Chicago department store. Neatly tucked against the sides were several jars of expensive vitamins and supplements. Every single item was meant for Sarah and her son. Wedged at the very bottom, crushed beneath the weight of the gifts, lay a cheap tin coffee mug. That was the only thing meant for Clara. Leaning over Clara's shoulder to snoop, Brenda caught a clear glimpse of the haul. The jealous smirk on her face instantly froze. Brenda let out an awkward cough. Arthur sure is considerate of his late comrade's widow, she muttered, trying to salvage the moment. Well, that mug is quite nice. Looks sturdy. Clara didn't say a word. She simply stared at the cheap enamel mug, a sudden wave of dark amusement washing over her. Just how blind had she been in her previous life? To grind her own pride into the dirt for a man like this, begging for scraps of his affection time and time again, it was pathetic. It wasn't that Arthur lacked a romantic bone in his body, nor was he incapable of tender care. He simply didn't care for her. Clara? A timid, fragile voice called out from the doorway. It was Sarah. Dressed in a faded floral blouse, she stood at the office entrance, clutching the hand of her 5-year-old son, Tommy. The moment her eyes landed on the massive package resting on the floor, a distinct glimmer of excitement flashed across her face. Just as quickly, she masked it, replacing the gleam with a picture-perfect expression of profound guilt. Clara, I heard from the floor manager that Arthur had a package delivered here, Sarah said, stepping into the room. She twisted the hem of her shirt, her eyes welling with tears. I'm so sorry. I know you must be furious with me. I swear, I tried to turn down the transfer. But Arthur insisted. He told me that if I didn't take the position in Chicago, his fallen squad leader would never be able to rest in peace. She let out a soft sob. Please don't blame Arthur. If anyone is at fault, it's me. With that, she nudged the little boy at her side. Go on, Tommy. Apologize to Aunt Clara. Tell her we're sorry for taking what belonged to her. What did a 6-year-old know about corporate transfers and marital betrayal? Tommy merely shrank behind his mother's legs, glaring at Clara with a mix of timid confusion and raw, misplaced hostility. Clara leaned down, plucked the cheap enamel mug from the depths of the burlap sack, and set it casually on her desk. Everything is right here. Take a look, and make sure nothing is missing. If it's all accounted for, Take it and go." Sarah's meticulously prepared barrage of tears and pathetic pleas caught in her throat. She stared at Clara in utter disbelief. "Clara, you aren't upset with me? Why on earth would I be upset with you?" Clara finally lifted her head, her gaze resting coolly on Sarah's hypocritical face. "Arthur gave you the transfer. Arthur bought you the package. None of this has anything to do with me." "But," Sarah bit her lower lip nervously, "but everyone in the factory says you must be heartbroken." "I'm not." Clara cut her off without missing a beat. "Take your things and leave. You're interrupting my work." Clara turned her back on the pair, sat down at her drafting table, and picked up her pencil to resume sketching out the blueprints. Then, "Thank you, Clara," Sarah muttered through gritted teeth. Straining under the weight of the massive burlap sack, she grabbed Tommy's hand and hurried out of the office in quiet defeat. After her shift ended, Clara returned to the two-bedroom company apartment Liberty Manufacturing had assigned to Arthur. Because her husband spent nearly the entire year stationed away from home, she had curated every single piece of furniture and decor herself. A handmade lace throw she had crocheted rested over the back of the sofa. A tin of premium imported Darjeeling Arthur's absolute favorite sat squarely on the coffee table. Hanging in the closet was a heavy wool overcoat she had commissioned just a few months prior, intending to gift it to him for the winter holidays. Clara walked straight to the coffee table and picked up the expensive tin of tea. Without a second thought, she popped the lid off and dumped the premium loose leaves straight into the kitchen trash can. Moving to her writing desk, she pulled open the bottom drawer and dug out a crisp business card. It had been slipped to her secretly 2 weeks ago by the technical director of a foreign-backed engineering firm during their scouting tour of the Liberty plant. "Engineer Clara," the man had told her, "keeping a talent like yours chained to an outdated regional plant is a tragic waste. Silicon Valley is paved with gold right now. If you're willing to make the jump, we'll start you at top dollar, room and board, fully covered. We can even handle your relocation paperwork," the man had promised. At the time, Clara's mind had been entirely consumed with joining Arthur in Chicago, so she had rejected the offer without a second thought. Now, she stared at the words embossed on the card Apex Precision Engineering, Silicon Valley, and picked up the fountain pen resting on her desk. Pulling out a fresh sheet of stationery, she set pen to paper without a sliver of hesitation. "Dear Director Davis, regarding your previous offer, after careful consideration, I have decided to accept." She folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and pressed a stamp into the corner. Letting out a long, shuddering exhale, she knew her escape route was secured. There was only one thing left to do. Opening the drawer once more, Clara pulled out a stack of blank legal paper and began drafting her divorce papers. Early the next morning, paperwork in hand, she knocked on Director Robert Miller's office door. "Clara, grab a seat," Miller greeted her, taking a sip from his heavy ceramic mug. Smiling warmly, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I've already submitted the paperwork to regional headquarters. The transfer has been officially reassigned to Sarah. To make up for it, the plant has decided to nominate you for the Outstanding Employee Award at the end of the year." "I don't need the award, Director." Clara didn't sit. Instead, she placed the 2 sheets of paper squarely on his desk. "I'm here for your signature, and the company seal as a witness." Miller glanced down at the bold lettering at the top of the page. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." His eyes nearly bulged out of his head. He shot up so fast his chair clattered backward onto the floor. "Clara, you're divorcing Captain Vance." In their insular, gossipy town in the 1980s, divorce was a scandal severe enough to drown a woman in spit and rumors. Not to mention, her husband was a high-ranking officer with a boundless future in the city. "I've already signed it," Clara said, her voice resolute. "I just need the administrative seal to process the military spousal separation." Miller pleaded with her, his tone desperate. "Clara, are you still throwing a fit over that transfer? Couples fight, but it passes. You argue at night and make up by morning." "Director." She met his gaze without flinching. "My mind is made up. But how is a single woman supposed to survive after a divorce? People will whisper behind your back until it breaks you. You don't need to worry about me. I've already secured a position down south. As soon as the paperwork clears, I'm leaving." Her absolute certainty left no room for negotiation. Seeing her unyielding expression, Miller finally stopped arguing. With a heavy sigh, he stamped the documents. "Just don't come to regret this, Clara." Leaving the administrative building, Clara headed straight home. At 7 o'clock that evening, while she was eating dinner, the front door was suddenly kicked open. Arthur stood in the doorway, covered in the dust of the road. It was glaringly obvious that the moment he got the call, he had driven like a madman all the way from Chicago. "Clara, have you lost your damn mind?" He closed the distance in long, furious strides and seized her wrist. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "You go running to the plant manager throwing a tantrum about a divorce over one lost position? Do you have any idea what will happen if the military brass catches wind of this? My entire career will be ruined." Clara didn't struggle. She merely stared at his contorted features with unsettling calm. "So, you didn't race back here because you were terrified of losing me. You came back because you're terrified I'll ruin your career. Is that right?" Arthur jolted. The iron grip on her wrist loosened a fraction. "Why are you being so completely unreasonable?" he snapped, tossing her hand aside and violently loosening his tie. "Clara, I always thought you were a rational, understanding woman. My squad leader died saving my life. Sarah is a widow left with a young boydo. You have any idea how pitiful that is? What does it matter if you give her the transfer? Why do you have to be so incredibly selfish? So cold-blooded? Selfish. Cold-blooded." Clara stared at the man she had loved across 2 lifetimes. A sharp, metallic taste of blood suddenly welled up in the back of her throat. "Arthur, your comrade died to save you. You owe him a life. That much is true." Clara stared directly into his eyes, her words measured and deliberate. "If you want to repay that debt, you are entirely free to marry her. You could have given her your own promising career." She pointed a trembling finger at the military commendation pinned to his chest, every word landing like a physical blow. "Instead, you sacrificed my future to buy yourself a pristine reputation. Tell me, Arthur, who is the selfish one here?" Arthur's hand shot up, slamming down onto the dining table with enough force to send the china bowls rattling in a sharp, discordant clatter. "Clara, you are utterly unreasonable." His chest heaved with explosive anger as he pointed an accusatory finger inches from her face. "Is there a single thought in your head that doesn't revolve around your own personal gain? Do you possess any sense of duty at all? If I had known you were this narrow-minded, I never would have married you." Those words sucked the air out of the room, leaving behind a suffocating, deathly silence. Clara looked at him, and he glared right back. She knew that look far too well. In her previous life, after Sarah drowned herself in the reservoir, he had stared at her with those exact same eyes, the eyes of a man looking at a murderer for 30 agonizing years. It didn't matter if Sarah lived or died. In his mind, Clara would always be the selfish, narrow-minded villain of his story. The last lingering ember of resentment in Clara's heart finally burned itself out, scattering into ash. "You're right," Clara said, lowering her gaze. The frantic tension bled out of her voice, leaving behind a chilling calm. "I am narrow-minded. I don't deserve you. So, let's just go our separate ways." "What did you just say?" he asked, completely blindsided. Without answering, Clara turned and walked into the kitchen, returning a moment later with a fresh bowl of rice. "Let's eat first." The abrupt shift in her demeanor left Arthur momentarily disoriented. Assuming he had won, he let out a cold, dismissive snort. He pulled out his chair and sat down, adopting the magnanimous air of a victor granting a pardon. "It's good that you've come to your senses. Once this meal is over, I don't want to hear another word about a divorce," he commanded, treating his wife like a subordinate who needed a firm hand. "After Sarah moves to Chicago and gets the kids settled, I'll figure out a way to transfer you there too. When my bonus comes in next month, I'll buy you a nice Hamilton watch." A harsh reprimand followed by a cheap reward. He was managing her just as he managed his troops. Clara didn't bother responding. She simply ate her dinner in absolute silence. Halfway through the meal, a frantic, violent pounding erupted at the front door. "Arthur, are you home? Arthur, please help me," a woman screamed, her voice cracking with sheer panic. It was Sarah. Arthur froze, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. The color drained from his face. "Arthur, Tommy has a terrible fever." Sarah sobbed hysterically on the other side of the door. "His eyes are rolling back, and he's having a seizure. I can't carry him on my own. Please, you have to help me." Without a second thought, Arthur dropped his silverware. He shot out of his seat with such violent urgency that his chair flipped backward, crashing loudly against the floor. He charged toward the entryway in long, desperate strides, not bothering to spare Clara a single glance. "Arthur," Clara said softly, her eyes fixed on the steaming bowl of soup resting between them. "Dinner is getting cold." He grabbed the doorknob. If you walk out that door tonight, Clara continued, her voice devoid of emotion, there really will be nothing left between us but a divorce decree. It was the final choice she would ever offer him. It was also the closure she needed for a lifetime of wasted devotion. The veins on the back of Arthur's hand bulged as he gripped the brass knob. He whipped his head around, his eyes blazing with self-righteous fury. Have you lost your damn mind, Clara? He roared. There is a child dying out there. How can you possibly be this cold-blooded? Clara closed her eyes, letting out a soft, hollow laugh. Fine. Go. Arthur shot her a vicious glare before bursting out the door. From the hallway, she could hear his frantic, soothing voice. Don't cry, Sarah. I'm right here. I'll get Tommy to the hospital right now. The chaotic sound of their rushing footsteps faded into the distance. Clara sat alone at the dining table in absolute silence. She didn't bother righting the overturned chair, nor did she make any move to clear the cold remnants of dinner. Instead, she stood and walked straight into the bedroom, pulling a battered wicker suitcase from beneath the bed. She packed only the bare essentials. A few sets of worn clothes, some engineering textbooks, her identification papers, and the few $100s she had managed to save on her own. The suitcase was incredibly light. So light it felt as though the past 3 years of her life had left no physical trace in this house. Finally, she took the signed divorce petition and placed it dead center on the desk. Unclasping the necklace Arthur had given her on their wedding day, she laid it carefully beside the papers. At 4 a.m, suitcase in hand, Clara arrived at the local train station. As the train slowly pulled away from the platform, rumbling into the night, it carried her toward a vast, open horizon that finally belonged only to her. Meanwhile, Arthur spent the entire night at the county hospital, keeping watch over Sarah and her son. When he finally dragged his exhausted body home the next morning, he fully expected to push open the door and find Clara standing there with a hot breakfast ready, bowing her head in her usual, quiet compromise. But what greeted him instead was a suffocating chill. On the dining table, last night's braised pork had congealed into a stark white block of fat, and the steamed fish gave off a faint, unpleasant odor. There, sitting quietly amidst the cold, ruined meal, lay the divorce petition and the wedding necklace. Clara, your temper is getting completely out of hand, Arthur muttered to the empty room, yanking at his collar in sheer frustration. He threw himself onto the sofa, lit a cigarette, and waited for her to return so he could demand an explanation. But he waited all day, and Clara never came back. The following day was the scheduled move to Chicago for Sarah and her son. Her bags were already packed, and she stood on the curb with Tommy, waiting. As soon as Arthur's car pulled up, Sarah hurried over, her eyes rimmed with red. Arthur, where is Clara? Does she still refuse to forgive me? Maybe I should just give the transfer back to her. I can't let my situation destroy your marriage. In the past, Arthur would have heard those words and praised Sarah for her deep sense of understanding. Today, however, looking at her pitiful, tear-stained face, his mind involuntarily snapped back to the chilling words Clara had spoken the night before. Let's just go our separate ways. A sudden, inexplicable surge of irritation twisted in his chest. It has nothing to do with you, Arthur replied, avoiding Sarah's gaze. His tone was clipped and hard as he pushed the car door open. Get in. I'm taking you to Chicago. After getting Sarah and her son settled in the city, the gnawing anxiety in Arthur's gut only expanded. Driven by an urgent panic, he drove straight back to the small town through the night and stormed into Liberty Manufacturing, intending to drag Clara out of the workshop. He convinced himself she was just throwing a prolonged tantrum, hiding out at work to punish him. But before he could get far, he was intercepted by Director Miller outside the administrative office. Captain Vance, what brings you back here? Looking for Clara? Director Miller asked, a cold, mocking smile touching his lips. Director, which section is Clara in? Please tell her to come out. Tell her I'm here to take her home, Arthur demanded, forcing down his rising temper. Home? What home? Miller shook his head, his eyes laced with undisguised contempt. Captain, you really don't know, do you? Clara is long gone. The very morning after you ran off to the hospital with Sarah, Clara got on a southbound train to Silicon Valley. She even transferred her permanent residency. Arthur stood utterly paralyzed, as if struck by lightning. Silicon Valley? That's impossible. Where could she possibly go on her own? She doesn't even have a letter of introduction. She was specially recruited by a foreign-backed firm down south, Miller replied plainly. She didn't need a letter of recommendation from us, Director Miller sighed. Finally unable to hold back his frustration, he tore into Arthur. You brought this on yourself, Arthur. Clara was a wonderful wife. She busted her back for you for 3 years, and did you ever care about her for even a single day? Arthur's face drained of color. How did I not care about her? He retorted defensively. I sent things home every month. Miller let out a bitter, incredulous laugh and pointed a finger square in Arthur's face. You call those things? That massive burlap sack you sent was packed to the brim with stuff for Sarah and her kid. When Clara opened that package, the whole office was watching. Out of that giant bag, the only thing that belonged to Clara was a cheap, beat-up enamel mug. Is that how you care for your wife? A loud ringing filled Arthur's ears, and his mind went completely blank. That's impossible, he roared, his voice cracking as he grabbed the director's arm. Every time I sent something, I bought 2 of everything. 2 tins of malted milk, 2 cuts of fabric. I was terrified Clara would think I was playing favorites, so I split everything evenly and put it all in one bag. How could it all end up going to Sarah? Miller yanked his arm free, glaring at him with icy disdain. Whatever happened, you can go back and ask your precious friend about it yourself. Arthur had no memory of how he managed to drive back to Chicago. His mind was entirely consumed by the chillingly dead, hollow look in Clara's eyes from that final night, along with her parting words. You sacrificed my future to buy yourself a pristine reputation. Only then did the crushing realization hit him. Clara hadn't been throwing a tantrum. She was completely, irrevocably done with him. He kicked open the door to Sarah's new dormitory at the Chicago Logistics Department. Inside, Sarah was trying on a brand new dress made from the very synthetic fabric he had shipped. Startled by his violent entrance and the murderous rage contorting his face, she jumped. Arthur, what's wrong? What exactly happened with the package I sent to the plant? Arthur demanded, his eyes bloodshot as he locked a lethal glare on her. I packed 2 sets of everything in that bag. Where is Clara's half? Why did you get all of it? Sarah paled, her eyes darting away in sheer panic. A second later, her eyes reddened, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. Arthur, I don't know, she stammered, twisting her fingers together in a picture of victimhood. When I went to pick up the things, Clara didn't say a word. She just kicked the bag over to me and said it was all mine. I thought it was your way of making things up to Tommy. I swear I didn't know Clara had a share in there. In the past, Arthur would have swallowed this fragile, innocent act without hesitation. But now, staring at the new dress draped over her body, a dress that should have been worn by Clara, sight burned his eyes. The sickening truth finally dawned on him. This woman was nowhere near as naive as she pretended to be. She had ruthlessly laid claim to everything that belonged to another man's wife without an ounce of guilt, and then had the nerve to play the victim right to his face. Arthur's heart plummeted. A colossal, suffocating wave of regret chewed at his insides like a venomous snake. He turned on his heel and headed straight for the door. Seeing him leave, Sarah suddenly lunged forward, wrapping her arms tightly around his waist from behind. Pressing herself against his back, her voice shifted, turning sickly sweet and blatantly explicit. Arthur, don't go. I know you and Clara divorced. She didn't appreciate everything you did, but I do. You've done so much for me and my son, and I have no other way to repay you. From now on, let me take care of you. Tommy needs a father too. As she spoke, her wandering hands reached down, boldly attempting to unbuckle his belt. Arthur's entire body went rigid as a violent surge of absolute disgust and nausea crawled up his throat. He grabbed Sarah's hand and violently shoved her away. Sarah fell to the ground, staring at him in shock. Get out! Arthur pointed outside, the veins on his forehead bulging. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. Don't use the squad leader as your shield. You make me sick. Until this very moment, Arthur had never truly seen Sarah's selfish and greedy true colors. For this manipulative, calculating woman, he had repeatedly wronged his lawful wife, even destroying his own family with his own 2 hands. Clara, I'm sorry. Clara. Arthur stumbled out of the dormitory, falling to his knees on the freezing autumn streets of Chicago. He covered his face, letting out a desperate, agonizing wail. From that day on, Arthur acted like a madman. He pulled every string he had, calling every factory in the South, searching for any trace of her in the vast sea of people like a headless fly. Without Arthur's protection, Sarah couldn't survive in the city. It wasn't long before she slinked back to the small town with her son, Tommy. A month later, Arthur returned to the town to handle some organizational transfer paperwork. That evening, he happened to walk past a secluded dead-end alley and unexpectedly heard a familiar female voice sobbing. "Stop pressuring me. Arthur doesn't care about us anymore. I really don't have any money." Arthur frowned, stopping in his tracks. He followed the sound and saw Sarah struggling with a sleazy-looking thug. The man grabbed Sarah by the hair, cursing viciously. "Sarah, stop playing the innocent victim. If you don't pay up, I'm taking my son today. If you don't pay, I'll go to the compound and tell everyone what kind of woman you really are." Sarah trembled in terror, desperately trying to cover the man's mouth. "Shut up. If anyone finds out Tommy is yours, we're both finished." Arthur felt like he had been struck by lightning, frozen in place. Tommy wasn't the squad leader's child. In that instant, Arthur felt the world spinning around him, his beliefs crumbling. He had repeatedly wronged his wife to repay a debt, only to find out he was supporting a tramp and an illegitimate child. "Sarah, how could you do this?" Arthur charged into the alley, his eyes bloodshot, punching the thug to the ground and pinning him by the throat. Seeing this, Sarah was terrified out of her wits. She knew that if her secret was exposed, she would not only be ruined but could also go to jail. Driven by extreme panic, she grabbed a bloody half-brick from the corner of the wall, closed her eyes, and smashed it against the back of Arthur's head. Thud! Arthur's vision went black as his large frame collapsed to the ground, blood instantly soaking the dirt. While unconscious, he had a long dream. He dreamed that Clara hadn't given up her spot to go to the city with him. He dreamed that Sarah drowned herself after being assaulted. He blamed his wife for all of his sins, subjecting the woman who loved him to 30 years of emotional abuse, wearing her down to skin and bones. He even recalled his dying words to his bodyguard, "Don't bury me in the same plot as Clara." He clearly saw the last spark of light in Clara's eyes extinguish when she heard those words outside the hospital room. "No, it wasn't like that, Clara. I'm sorry. I was wrong." Arthur jolted awake on his hospital bed, letting out a heart-wrenching scream. Tears streamed down his face. He finally understood why the Clara in this life had left with such absolute resolve. An immense, invisible hand of regret seized Arthur by the throat, choking the life out of him in a grip of unbearable agony. Sarah was soon arrested by the police for aggravated assault. Facing the grim reality of prison, the woman lashed out in sheer vindictiveness. During her interrogation, she publicly fabricated a scandalous affair between herself and Arthur, claiming that his exceptional care for her going so far as to steal his own wife's transfer spot was only because they had been sleeping together all along. This vicious lie, combined with the undeniable fact that Arthur had indeed divorced his wife over her, instantly solidified into irrefutable evidence against him. The ensuing rumors spread like wildfire, and the military brass was furious. Before Arthur's head wound had even fully healed, he was suspended pending a severe disciplinary review. His reputation was left in tatters. Stripped of everything, Arthur wandered the small northern town like a walking corpse, drowning in a prolonged, suffocating depression. That was until a year later, when he happened to glance at a state newspaper at a street kiosk. Plastered across the front page was a bold headline and a photograph. Silicon Valley's outstanding female entrepreneur, Clara. Arthur clutched the newspaper with a death grip, his hands trembling violently as heavy tears smashed against the newsprint. "Clara, my Clara," he choked out. He immediately bought a cross-country train ticket, heading straight for the West Coast. Clara's life in California had been smooth sailing. Riding the wave of the booming tech economy, her firm had successfully transitioned into a major corporate player, and she had made a name for herself as a prominent entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. One afternoon, returning to the corporate headquarters from a site inspection, Clara stepped into the grand lobby of the Apex Tower. Her eyes caught a security guard blocking a disheveled, ragged-looking man. "Sir, this is a private office building. You can't enter without an appointment," the guard stated firmly. "I'm looking for Clara. I'm her husband. Let me in," the man yelled. Hearing that hoarse, weather-beaten voice, Clara stopped in her tracks and turned her head. She could hardly believe her eyes. How had Arthur found his way here? When his frantic gaze darted over the guard's shoulder and landed on her, his entire body seized up. "Clara!" he cried out, his voice trembling as his eyes instantly flushed red. He shoved the guard aside and stumbled wildly toward her, dropping to his knees with a heavy thud right at her feet. Startled gazes from the crowded lobby immediately snapped toward the commotion, but Clara simply stood there, radiating an impenetrable, icy calm. "Clara, I was wrong. I truly know how wrong I was, Arthur pleaded, tilting his head up to look at her. He reached out a shaking hand to grasp the hem of her trousers, but the moment he met her freezing, indifferent stare, he flinched and pulled his hand back. I remember now. I remember everything, he sobbed, incoherently slapping his own head. In our past life, it was me who destroyed you. I was an absolute, irredeemable fool. I've gotten my retribution. I was suspended. I have absolutely nothing left. He slammed his forehead against the polished marble floor, the dull thud echoing through the lobby. Please, for the sake of the marriage we once had, just give me a chance to atone. I'll work like a dog for you. I just want to stay by your side and look at you. That's all I ask. Listening to his agonizing, gut-wrenching confession, Clara offered a faint, detached smile. Arthur, she finally spoke, her voice excruciatingly polite and distant. Since you remember our past life, you should also remember the very last words you spoke on your deathbed. Arthur's head snapped up, his face draining to a sickly, paper-white hue. Clara leaned in slightly. Staring directly into his terror-stricken eyes, she fed his dying wish from a lifetime ago back to him. Word for piercing word. Don't bury me in the same plot as Clara. Arthur trembled violently, as if the last ounce of his strength had been drained. He crumpled to the floor. In your past life, you didn't want to share a grave with me. Clara stood up straight, her eyes completely cold. In this life, I find it sickening just to breathe the same air as you. Without sparing him another glance, she turned and walked toward the elevator. Clara, Clara, don't go! Arthur wailed in agony from behind. He tried to scramble up and chase after her, but the security guards pinned him firmly to the floor. The elevator doors slowly slid shut. Through the narrowing gap, Clara saw him lying helplessly on the ground. Her heart remained utterly unmoved. A few days later, he returned, unwilling to give up. Clara, don't call me that. Arthur's voice was thick with pleading, even carrying a hint of a sob. I really know I was wrong. These past 2 years have been a living hell. Every day, I think about the porridge you made, the sweaters you knitted for me. He frantically pulled a red velvet box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing the same gold necklace he hadn't given her years ago. Look, I still have the necklace from our wedding. Clara, let's remarry, okay? I've already driven Sarah away. No one will ever come between us again. Clara, just give me a chance to make it up to you, please. He looked at her with desperate hope. Arthur? Clara looked down at him. You still don't understand. The problem between us was never Sarah. Arthur froze. Then what was it? It was your arrogance, your selfishness, and your deep-seated contempt for me. Clara dropped her smile, her gaze turning razor-sharp. You think you can just snap your fingers, and I should crawl back to you like a grateful dog to be your wife again. No, that's not what I meant. Arthur shook his head frantically. Stop looking for me. We crossed the point of no return a long time ago. Don't make me hate you. Arthur gripped the red velvet box tightly, the gold necklace cutting into his palm until it bled. He finally understood that some things, once broken, could never be put back together. With his self-righteous pride, he had single-handedly destroyed the only woman in the world who had loved him wholeheartedly. 5 years later, as Apex Group continued to expand its operations, Clara returned to the small northern town she had left long ago, this time as the chief representative of a Silicon Valley investment delegation. Surrounded by city officials and factory executives, Clara walked into Liberty Manufacturing. Director Miller, now with graying hair, marveled at her current success. Things change, people change. That was just how it was. During a break after the welcome banquet, Brenda, a former colleague from the factory, pulled Clara aside. After exchanging pleasantries, she hesitated for a long moment before bringing up the name in a hushed voice. Clara, did you hear about Arthur? Clara paused slightly, holding her teacup. Her voice was calm. What about him? He's dead, Brenda sighed, a look of pity crossing her face. It happened 3 years ago. I heard he took a trip down south. When he came back, he just completely fell apart. That brick Sarah hit him with left him with lasting damage. Plus, he was suspended, and his reputation was ruined. He couldn't even live in the military housing complex anymore, and had to move into a rundown shack in the slums. He stopped eating. He survived on cheap whiskey, trying to numb himself, Brenda murmured, leaning in close. He already had a bad stomach, and eventually, a perforated ulcer caused massive internal bleeding. Brenda studied Clara's face, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Word is, During his final days, the fever made him completely delirious. He didn't even have a soul around to pour him a glass of water. A few of the old guys from the Union Hall went to check on him, and they said he didn't recognize a single face. He just stared at the empty air, tears streaming down his sunken cheeks, muttering the exact same thing over and over. He kept saying, "Clara, I'm so sorry. I'll give you my life to make it right. Just please come back." Clara listened in silence, watching the loose tea leaves unfurl in the dark water of her cup. To her surprise, the news brought no vicious thrill of vindication. There was no hatred left to burn, nor any lingering grief to mourn. There was only a profound, bottomless quiet. "Is that right?" Clara murmured, her voice perfectly level. She drained the rest of her tea. That was his fate. Early the next morning, just hours before her flight out of the fading Midwestern town, a cold, misty drizzle settled over the streets. Clara drove out to Arthur's grave. The burial plot had been entirely surrendered to overgrown weeds and neglected earth. Standing beneath the gray sky, the rain dampening her coat, she stared in silence at the weathered headstone. A singular memory flickered through her mind. His dying breath from her previous life, that vicious, cutting demand that they never share the same earth. 2 entire lifetimes of entanglement, the bitter resentments, the wasted devotion, the agonizing obsession had finally been reduced to this lonely mound of dirt. Reaching into her pocket, Clara produced a single white daisy. She knelt and laid it gently at the base of his moss-eaten marker. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice slicing cleanly through the chill of the autumn rain. 2 lifetimes of debts and grievances. It ends here. She looked at the stone one last time. "If there is another life, let us never find each other." Clara opened her black umbrella and turned her back on the grave. The wet autumn leaves crunched softly beneath her boots as she walked away, her strides steady, resolute, and looking nowhere but forward. That ending was exactly what his arrogance deserved, right? Let me know which part of her payback was your absolute favorite in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out on the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have an incredible story about second chances. It's a beautiful journey of a woman finally walking away from a toxic 15-year relationship to choose herself and finding true, peaceful love along the way. Let's dive in. Chloe and her husband, Carter, hated each other more than anyone else in the world. He hated her for using her family's wealth to force him into an arranged marriage, destroying his romance with his childhood sweetheart. She hated him because, on their wedding night, he had sworn to her, "I will never fall in love with a woman like you." For 10 years of marriage, they cursed each other every day, wishing the other would get hit by a car. But when a business rival cut their brake lines, it was Carter who, as they sped along a winding mountain road, suddenly shoved her out of the driver's side. "Roll out and live a good life," he shouted. In the split second the car plunged off the cliff, he used his last ounce of strength to send her a text message. "In this life, I've repaid the debt I owed your family. If there is a next life, I beg you to let me go." Later, when Chloe was preparing his body at the morgue, she discovered that pressed tightly against his cold chest, the one thing he had protected to his death, was a photograph of him and his childhood sweetheart. That very night, she signed the divorce papers and leaped from the roof of the hospital, refusing to be shackled by anyone ever again. When Chloe opened her eyes, she found herself back in time, just before their engagement party. She walked into her father's study. "Dad, cancel the engagement," she said. "Even without him, I can live a perfectly good life on my own." In this lifetime, she would be the one to step aside and fulfill his deep devotion to his true love, and in doing so, set herself free as well. When Chloe had pushed open the study door, her father was holding the guest list for her engagement party with Carter, grinning from ear to ear. Seeing her enter, he handed the list to her. "Chloe, see if there's anyone else we need to invite. The Fletcher family said they'll leave it entirely up to us." She didn't take it. She just looked at him calmly. "Dad, cancel it." The smile on her father's face froze instantly. "What did you just say?" "I said, let's cancel the engagement with Carter," she repeated. The guest list fluttered from her father's hands to the floor. He stared at her in shock, as if looking at a total stranger. "Chloe Winslow, do you have any idea what you're saying? To marry Carter Fletcher, you went on a hunger strike and almost lost your life. And now you're telling me to cancel it?" Of course she knew. In her past life, she had been exactly that foolish. She had loved Carter for 15 years from their first meeting as teenagers through 10 years of marriage. She had chased after him like a clown, but in the end, it only earned her his absolute disgust and hatred. In that final car crash, he hadn't pushed her to safety out of love. He did it merely to repay the debt he owed the Winslow family. He had said that in the next life, he begged her to let him go. Fine. In this lifetime, she would let him go, and let herself go, too. "Dad, I'm tired," she said, looking at her father, her voice very soft. "You can't force a relationship that isn't meant to be. I understand that now." Her father wanted to try and persuade her, but she had already turned and walked away. As she was passing through the living room, Carter happened to be walking in from outside. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his features cold and stern. Seeing her, he made no effort to hide the obvious distaste in his eyes. "What kind of game are you trying to play now?" She stopped in her tracks and met his gaze. His eyes were exactly the same as they would be 10 years later, completely devoid of warmth. "Carter," she began, her voice as flat and detached as if she were talking about a stranger's business. "Our engagement is off." He froze. For the very first time, a clear look of bewilderment flashed across those eyes that were usually filled with nothing but impatience. She didn't spare him another glance, and walked straight past him. With the engagement party just around the corner, the news of the union between the Fletcher and Winslow families had already spread across the entire city. Her one-sided cancellation of the engagement was undoubtedly a vicious slap in the face to the Fletcher family. Carter's phone calls started coming in shortly after. She hung up. He called again. She hung up a second time, and then blocked his number. The world was finally quiet. That night, her best friend sent her a photo taken at the most exclusive private club downtown. In the picture, Carter was sitting in a booth, his face dark and gloomy as he threw back drinks. Beside him sat a girl in a white dress, looking at him with eyes full of heartache. It was Lily, the childhood sweetheart he had loved for half his life. Her best friend sent a voice message. "What is going on with Carter? Being so sketchy with another woman right before his engagement. Chloe, we can't have a man like this." Chloe smiled faintly and typed back 3 words. "I'm done with him." The next day, Chloe was awakened by the urgent ringing of her doorbell. Opening the door, she found Carter standing outside, bringing a chill in with him. There were faint, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept all night. "Chloe, have you had enough of this tantrum?" His voice was hoarse, carrying suppressed anger. She leaned against the doorframe, uncucked him lazily. "Can I help you, Mr. Fletcher?" Being addressed as Mr. Fletcher made his already awful complexion turn even darker. "You never used to call me that," he said through gritted teeth. "I was young and foolish back then," she replied. Carter's chest heaved violently as he stared her down. "Cut the hard-to-get act, Chloe. It's boring." He reached out to grab her wrist, but she dodged sideways. "Carter, we have nothing to do with each other anymore," she said. "Please leave." "Nothing to do with each other?" He sneered. "Who was it that cried and screamed that she wouldn't marry anyone but me? Who went as far as hurting herself just to force my hand? What's with the high and mighty act now?" His words were like a dull knife, hacking at her long, scabbed wounds. Yes, those were all the stupid things she had done. She once believed that as long as she tried hard enough and loved him enough, one day she could warm his stone-cold heart. But she was wrong. "People change," she said, lowering her eyes. "I was just blind before." That sentence completely ignited Carter's fury. He took a step forward, the air around him dropping to a terrifying chill. "Chloe, who do you think you are? What do you have besides the Winslow family name? You couldn't even compare to a single strand of Lily's hair. She's kind and pure, unlike you, who only knows how to use despicable tricks." Lily again. In her past life, that name had been like a curse haunting her entire marriage. No matter what she did, in his eyes, she could never measure up to Lily. When she learned to cook for him, he called it pretentious, saying it wasn't as good as a simple bowl of noodles made by Lily's own hands. When she intercepted drinks for him at parties to spare him the alcohol, he called her manipulative, unlike Lily, whose low alcohol tolerance made people want to protect her. For 10 years, she had lived in Lily's shadow, turning her life into a complete joke. She lifted her head, meeting his furious gaze, and smiled. "You're right, I don't compare to her. That's why I'm stepping aside for you two. I wish you a long, happy life together and a house full of kids. Now, please get the hell out of my house." Carter choked on her words. He had probably never imagined that Chloe, the girl who had chased after him for 15 years, would ever say something like that. He stared at her in disbelief. In his eyes, aside from anger, there was a trace of panic, that she couldn't understand. In the end, he didn't say a word, turning and leaving. She watched his flustered back, her chest aching faint. Her resolve to cancel the engagement was firm. Unable to change her mind, her father had no choice but to announce to the public that she was feeling unwell and that the engagement party would be postponed. The Fletcher family was probably kept at bay by Carter, as they didn't come looking for her either. Life suddenly became peaceful. She started playing the violin again, picking up the instrument she had set aside for 10 years. In her previous life, for Carter's sake, she had given up her admission letter to the music conservatory, abandoning her dream. Back then, she had thought love was everything in life. Only now did she realize that loving herself was what truly mattered. One day, while she was practicing in the music room, Lily showed up uninvited. She was wearing a pure white dress. Her face bore an innocent and conciliatory expression. "Chloe, I'm sorry. It's all my fault that Carter fought with you." As soon as she opened her mouth, that familiar fake innocence gave Chloe a physical sense of disgust. "Carter actually cares about you a lot. Look, he even had a violin bow custom made for you." As she spoke, she produced an elegant box from behind her back. Inside lay a brand new violin bow, engraved with the initials CF for Carter Fletcher. In her previous life, Carter had given Chloe this exact same bow. He had presented it to her on her birthday in front of all their guests. At the time, she had been moved to tears, believing it was proof of his love for her. Only later did she find out that it was nothing more than a prop for him to put on a show in front of his business partner's thoughtless gift meant to brush her off. The gift he had truly poured his heart into was a limited edition necklace for Lily. Now, looking at Lily's seemingly innocent face, Chloe felt nothing but a deep sense of irony. "No thanks," Chloe said coldly. "His things disgust me." Lily's face paled, and her eyes instantly brimmed with tears. "Chloe, how can you say that?" "Carter, it's not your place to tell me what to say," Chloe interrupted her. "If there's nothing else, please leave." Biting her lip and looking as if she had suffered a monumental grievance, Lily finally took the bow and left. Not long after she departed, the butler brought in an anonymous package. Chloe opened it to find an old violin case. Inside lay an antique violin bow that looked quite aged, but the moment she saw it, her breath hitched. This was the bow she had been searching for forever, an antique crafted by an 18th century Italian master bowmaker. It was the only keepsake her mother had left her, but it had been lost, and despite searching for a long time, she had never been able to find it. In her previous life, she had mentioned it to Carter, but he had merely replied impatiently, "It's just a piece of broken wood. Why was it here now? Who had sent it?" At the city's annual charity auction gala, the Winslow family was one of the primary hosts, so Chloe had no choice but to attend. After changing into her evening gown in the dressing room, she pushed open the door, only to see Carter. He stood at the end of the corridor, his tall, straight figure casting a shadow as he stared at her with a heavy gaze. Keeping her eyes straight ahead, Chloe prepared to walk right past him, but he suddenly spoke. "Did you receive the bow?" Her footsteps faltered. So he was the one who had sent it. Where did he find it, and why was he returning it to her? He was constantly hurling vicious words at her, yet doing things like this that could easily be misunderstood. What exactly was he trying to pull? She didn't answer and continued walking straight ahead. "Chloe!" he snapped, seemingly angered by her blatant disregard, his voice laced with fire. She couldn't be bothered with him. Inside the gala, it was a scene of glamorous dresses, elegant guests, and clinking glasses. Chloe found a quiet corner and sat down, trying her best to keep a low profile, but trouble still found its way to her door. Holding 2 glasses of red wine, Lily swayed gracefully as she walked over to her. "Chloe, I'm here to apologize to you on Carter's behalf. Everything before was just a misunderstanding." She offered one of the glasses to Chloe. Chloe looked at the wine but didn't take it. "I don't want to drink." The smile on Lily's face instantly stiffened. "Are you refusing to forgive me, Chloe?" Her eyes welled up with tears as she spoke. "If me drinking this will make you less angry." She made a dramatic show of preparing to down both glasses. Right at that moment, Carter strode over. He snatched the wine glass from Lily's hand and glared fiercely at Chloe. "Chloe, are you bullying Lily again?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to draw the attention of everyone around them. In an instant, Chloe became the center of scrutiny. Right on cue, Lily shrank behind Carter, sobbing softly. "It's not Chloe's fault. It's my fault." What a masterpiece of fake innocence. Watching the scene unfold before her, Chloe felt nothing but a mix of absurdity and sorrow. This was the man she had loved for 15 years, a man who, without ever bothering to learn the truth, would always take someone else's side and point the finger at her. The whispers and pointing around them grew louder. The Winslow heiress has way too much of a temper. I know, right? Lily is such a sweet girl. The poor thing. In that instant, Chloe's heart turned completely to ice. Just then, an accident occurred. Lily seemingly lost her footing, her entire body stumbling sideways and crashing right into an antique painting displayed on a nearby stand. The painting was the grand finale piece of the auction, worth hundreds of millions. With a loud rip, the priceless scroll was slashed open by the ring on Lily's finger, leaving a long, gaping tear. The entire room erupted into an uproar. Lily turned deathly pale from fright, sobbing hysterically. It's all my fault. I'm so clumsy. Everyone's gazes shot toward Chloe like sharp swords. Carter's eyes were colder than ever. Chloe, you are truly vicious. Look at how badly you've terrified Lily. Throwing those words at her, he immediately stepped forward to hold Lily, comforting her softly. Chloe stood rooted to the spot, completely unable to defend herself against the mounting accusations. Just as the security guards approached to escort away the supposed culprit, Carter, who had been shielding Lily, suddenly let go of her. He marched up to Chloe and, under the shocked gazes of everyone in the room, grabbed her by the wrist and forcefully dragged her out of the banquet hall. At the far end of the corridor, Carter shoved her roughly against the wall. She gasped in pain. "When are you going to stop this endless tantrum?" he demanded, his eyes bloodshot as he glared at her. "Are you happy now that you've ruined the painting?" She looked at him and suddenly let out a laugh. "That's right. I did it on purpose. I just can't stand seeing her happy. Are you satisfied with that answer?" Carter's face instantly turned livid. Right at that moment, Lily came rushing after them. Shockingly, she was holding Chloe's antique violin bow in her hands. "Carter, don't blame Chloe. She didn't mean it." As she spoke, she stepped right in front of Chloe. "Chloe, this bow was left to me by your mother. Carter went through so much trouble to find it for me. Please, can you give it back to me?" She had the audacity to twist the truth, claiming that Chloe's mother's keepsake belonged to her. Chloe trembled with rage. "Lily, do you have absolutely no shame?" "I'm not lying," Lily said, looking pitifully at Carter. "Carter, Auntie really did leave this for me." Carter's gaze fell on the bow, his expression conflicted. He fell silent for a moment before speaking slowly. "Chloe, it's just a bow. Let her have it." Chloe's heart sank entirely to rock bottom. Seeing his reaction, Lily immediately smiled. Chloe subconsciously reached out to snatch the bow back. Amidst the brief struggle, Lily suddenly let go. The precious antique bow hit the floor with a sharp, sickening snap. The world seemed to fall dead silent. Chloe stared at the bow, now snapped cleanly into two pieces on the floor. It was the only memento she had left of her Madeira treasure she had only just gotten back. And now, it was broken. Destroyed by the two people she hated most in this world. Carter froze in shock as well. He looked at the broken bow on the ground, then back at Chloe, as if wanting to say something. But she couldn't hear a single word anymore. An uncontrollable fury erupted from the depths of her soul, incinerating every last shred of her reason. She crouched down, picked up one of the jagged, splintered halves, and lunged upward, driving it straight toward Carter's chest. "Carter, I'll kill you!" Everything happened in a flash. Carter's pupils violently constricted. He instinctively raised his arm to block. Chloe felt a sharp pain in her wrist as the jagged piece of wood abruptly changed direction and plunged viciously into her own arm. Blood instantly gushed out, staining her white evening gown red. Carter froze. He stared at the wound on her arm, all the color draining completely from his face. His lips trembled, but he couldn't make a sound. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally found his voice, and a broken sentence slipped from his lips. Why didn't you dodge?" His eyes were filled with panic and bewilderment. "Weren't you always the best at dodging before?" As soon as the words left his mouth, he stunned himself, his face full of confusion. Before? When had they ever had a before where she needed to dodge? The smell of disinfectant in the hospital room was pungent. After her arm had been stitched up with 7 stitches and wrapped in thick bandages, Carter stayed by her bedside, refusing to leave for even a second. He looked even worse than she did, muttering the same words over and over again. "I'm sorry. Chloe, it's my fault. I shouldn't have, Chloe. Please don't be mad anymore. Let's go back to how we were, okay? Once your injury heals, We'll get engaged. I'll marry you, treat you well, and never let you suffer any grievances again." He rambled incoherently, like a child who had done something terribly wrong. Chloe leaned against the headboard, listening quietly. Not a single ripple of emotion stirred in her heart. If she had heard these words in her past life, she probably would have wept tears of joy. But now, it only felt deeply ironic. Belated affection was cheaper than dirt. "Carter," she finally spoke, cutting off his endless babbling. He fell silent immediately, looking at her nervously. "We're done," she said, looking straight into his eyes, enunciating every word with absolute clarity. "From now on, we go our separate ways. We have nothing to do with each other anymore." Carter's body swayed. He stared at her in disbelief, as if trying to find any trace of a joke on her face. But there was none. Her eyes were as dead and calm as stagnant water. His eyes slowly turned red. This man, who had always acted so high and mighty around her, who had always been too stingy to even give her a pleasant look, was crying. But so what? Her heart had already died during those 10 years of torment and that final, tragic car crash. On the day she was discharged, her father came to pick her up. He looked at her injured arm, hesitating to speak, before finally letting out a sigh. "Chloe, are you really sure about this?" She nodded. "Dad, I want to go stay in a small town down south for a while to clear my head. There's a highly skilled luthier there. Maybe he can fix Mom's keepsake." Her father didn't object. He only told her to take good care of herself. She packed a few simple bags and, without telling anyone, quietly left the city that suffocated her. Her car drove out of the city and merged onto the highway heading south. Not long after, a black Bentley suddenly sped up from behind, aggressively cutting her off and forcing her car to a stop on the emergency shoulder. Chloe frowned. When she recognized the license plate, a surge of anger flared in her chest. It was Carter's car. What did he want? Would he never leave her alone? The window of the Bentley rolled down, but Carter wasn't looking in her direction. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the passenger side. He had probably assumed the person driving was just a chauffeur when he forced the car to pull over. Staring into the empty air, he spoke with anxious urgency. "Lily, listen to my explanation. Last night was my fault. I shouldn't have lost my temper with you. There is nothing going on between me and Chloe. I just didn't want things to blow out of proportion. Please don't be mad. I've already made everything clear to her. I will never let her bully you again." Chloe sat in the driver's seat, listening expressionlessly. So, he had chased her down thinking the person in the car was Lily. How truly ridiculous. Without saying a word, she restarted her car, swerved around his, and sped away. In the rearview mirror, Carter seemed to finally realize something was wrong. He stuck his head out the window, his expression shifting from astonishment to shock, and finally to pure panic. He must have suddenly realized something, because he began honking his horn frantically. Chloe didn't look back. She slammed on the gas, leaving him far behind. That night, she arrived at a picturesque southern town called Willow Creek. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls, all of them from Carter. Without hesitation, she blocked his number again and checked into a quiet bed and breakfast. She texted her best friend to let her know she was safe, and a reply came back almost immediately. "Chloe, where did you go? Carter is losing his mind. He's looking for you everywhere, and even came to my place. I heard he got into a huge fight with Lily and chewed her out completely. Seems like he finally realized he had the wrong person. It's hilarious. Is his brain running on dial-up or what?" Chloe looked at the text on her screen, the corners of her mouth twitching upward, and then she laughed too. Willow Creek was beautiful, with its cobblestone streets, small footbridges, and winding streams. Following the address she had been given, she found the residence of the legendary master luthier. It was an old estate, hidden deep down a quiet lane, lacking even a sign at the door. She knocked on the door. After a long wait, it finally opened just a crack. The person who answered was a very young man. He was dressed in a simple, unadorned linen shirt, his features sharp and cold, exuding a striking elegance. He looked even more unapproachable and cold than Carter. "Can I help you?" His voice was just as chilly and detached as his demeanor. "I'm looking for Master Silas," she said. He looked her up and down, his gaze pausing for a fraction of a second on the bandage wrapped around her arm. "That would be me." Chloe was taken aback. She hadn't expected such a highly skilled master to be so young. She explained the purpose of her visit and handed him the box containing the broken bow. He took it, opened the lid for a brief glance, and immediately handed it back. "It can't be fixed. Why not? The break is too severe. It's beyond saving. His answer was blunt and decisive, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. Master Silas, I know this bow might not mean much to you, but to me, that's none of my business, he interrupted her smoothly. Please leave. With that, he moved to shut the door. Panicking, Chloe quickly wedged her hand against the frame to stop him. Master Silas, I know you have a lot of rules, but as long as you're willing to fix it, I'll agree to any condition you have. Hearing this, he paused. Those detached, cold eyes fell on her once more. Any condition? Yes. He suddenly smiled. It was a very faint smile, but it looked like the first melting of winter snow. All right. In the woods behind this estate, every morning just before sunrise, there is a bird called the dawn finch. Its call is very distinct and urgent, but it gets mixed in with the songs of all the other birds and vanishes in a flash. The day you manage to record its complete, uninterrupted call for me is the day I will fix your bow. Dropping those words, he shut the door with a loud bang. Chloe stood at the door, completely stunned. What kind of condition was that? It was clearly a deliberate attempt to make things difficult, but she had no choice. She had to get this violin bow fixed. Over the next few days, Chloe woke up before dawn every morning, lugging recording equipment to the bamboo forest behind the estate to keep watch. Silas hadn't lied to her. The bamboo forest was home to a vast variety of birds. As soon as morning broke, a cacophony of different bird calls would rise and fall, resembling a chaotic, disorganized symphony. Trying to distinguish one specific, urgent bird call from the rest was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. She kept watch for 3 consecutive days, but caught absolutely nothing. Exhausted every day, she would fall asleep the moment her head hit the pillow, upon returning to the bed and breakfast. Carter, however, didn't seem to have given up on finding her. Through her father, he learned of her whereabouts. Her father called, telling her that Carter had practically begged him, hoping she would return. Chloe, Dad knows you've been wronged, but that boy Carter, it seems he truly realizes his mistakes. She simply replied with a faint tone. Dad, I'm doing perfectly fine right now. She knew Carter's methods well. If he wanted to come, no one could stop him. But to her surprise, it wasn't him who showed up, it was Lily. Lily had tracked down the bed and breakfast where Chloe was staying and cornered her right at her room's door. After just a few days of not seeing each other, Lily looked noticeably haggard, having lost all of her previous delicate and endearing charm. Chloe, you really have some nerve, completely bewitching Carter like this. Lily spat, staring at Chloe with undisguised jealousy and resentment in her eyes. Did you think hiding out here would make him forget you? Let me tell you, that's impossible. He's completely obsessed with you now. He even abandoned all his company affairs just to look for you. What kind of spell did you cast on him? Watching Lily's hysterical meltdown, Chloe only found it laughable. Lily, who he loves or who he thinks about, has absolutely nothing to do with me. You've got the wrong person. You should be going after him instead of acting like a lunatic here. Chloe stepped around her, ready to head out, but Lily suddenly grabbed her injured arm. Chloe, give Carter back to me. Lily tugged violently, pulling at the wound on Chloe's arm and sending a jolt of piercing pain shooting through it. Chloe gasped in agony and forcefully shoved her off. Losing her balance, Lily stumbled backward and smacked her forehead against the doorframe. The skin instantly turned a bright, angry red. Just then, a cold voice rang out from behind them. What kind of theatrical performance are you putting on this early in the morning? Chloe turned around and saw Silas standing at the top of the stairs, though she had no idea when he had arrived. He had his arms crossed, watching them with an expression of utter apathy. Seeing Silas, Lily froze for a second before bursting into even harder sobs. I just wanted to say a few words to Chloe and she pushed me. Clutching her forehead, she put on an incredibly convincing act of a victim. If this had been the past, Carter would have probably charged forward and torn Chloe to pieces upon seeing this scene. Too bad the person standing in front of them was Silas. He merely cast a frigid glance at Lily before his eyes landed on Chloe's arm, which was now red and irritated from being grabbed. Do you not want your arm anymore? His tone was flat, devoid of any discernible emotion. Chloe shook her head. He didn't say another word to her. Turning to Lily, he stated coldly, "My place does not welcome outsiders. You have exactly 3 seconds to disappear." His presence was so intimidating that Lily visibly shuddered under his stare. Forgetting to even keep up her crying act, she scrambled away as fast as her legs could carry her. The world was finally peaceful again. Silas's gaze returned Chloe. You can't even handle a minor nuisance like that, yet you still want to get your bow fixed? His words dripped with mockery. Chloe remained silent. Follow me, he tossed over his shoulder. She hesitated for a moment before following him. He led her into his studio. It was a very spacious room, filled with all kinds of luthier tools and wood. The air was permeated with the mixed scent of wood and rosin. It smelled wonderful. He took out some wound ointment and gauze from a first aid kit and tossed them to her. Change the dressing yourself, he said, and then stopped paying attention to her. He sat down at his workbench, picked up a half-finished violin, and began to polish it with intense focus. Sunlight streamed in from the window, spilling over him and bathing him in a soft halo of light. With his head bowed, his expression was so focused and reverent that it was as if he were handling a priceless treasure. For a moment, Chloe was mesmerized. Although this man seemed icy on the outside, he possessed a passionate heart. He had a genuine, deep devotion to his craft. Chloe silently changed her bandages and sat to the side, careful not to disturb him. She didn't know how much time had passed when he finally stopped what he was doing. He picked up a small, compact device from his side and handed it to her. It's an infrasound analyzer, he explained concisely. The frequency of the dawn finch's call falls outside the range of normal human hearing. You might be able to find it using this. Chloe froze. He was actually helping her. She took the device, a surge of warmth swelling in her chest. Thank you. He didn't look at her, merely giving a faint hum in response. Don't celebrate just yet. Whether you can find it or not still depends on you. Once you find it, then we can talk about fixing your bow. Although his words were as unforgiving as ever, she knew he had already relented. With the device Silas gave her, things went much smoother. The very next morning, Chloe successfully captured that unique sound wave in the bamboo forest. She brought the recorded audio to Silas. His face remained expressionless as he listened. He merely nodded. You pass. He took the broken violin bow from her hands and examined it carefully for a moment. It's a very tricky break. Repairing it requires a special raw material for the adhesive. We need to go into the mountains to find it. You're coming with me. Chloe didn't refuse. And so, the two of them went into the mountains together. The mountain paths were rugged and difficult to navigate, yet Silas walked as if on flat ground. He spoke very little, spending most of the time leading the way silently in front. Occasionally, he would stop to point at a certain plant and tell her its name and habits. Only then did she realize that he was not only a master luthier, but also a botany expert. Deep in the mountains, they found a type of plant that secreted a transparent resin. Silas carefully collected the resin and placed it into a specialized container. On their way back, the sky was gradually darkening. As they were walking down a steep slope, Chloe's foot slipped, and she was about to tumble down. With quick reflexes, Silas grabbed her, pulling her straight into his chest. His chest was firm and carried a faint scent of pine wood. Chloe's face instantly turned bright red. Thank you, she stammered. He let go of her, the tips of his ears seemingly a bit flushed as well. Watch where you're walking, he said, his tone still as icy as ever. By the time they returned to town, it was completely dark. They walked side by side along the cobblestone street, the lanterns from the bed and breakfast emitting a warm, welcoming glow up ahead. Silas suddenly spoke up. Your ex-fiancé seems to be here. Chloe's heart sank. He hasn't found you, Silas added. He's staying at the best bed and breakfast in town, sending people out every day to ask for news about you. Oh, Chloe simply gave a faint murmur of acknowledgement. You aren't worried? He asked. Worried about what? She asked in return. Is he going to kidnap me and drag me back? Silas glanced at her and said no more. The next day he began repairing her violin bow. She watched from the side. His movements were precise and elegant, as if he were performing a sacred ritual. Watching those two broken pieces of wood being glued together, polished, and brought back to life bit by bit in his hands, she felt as if something had filled her own heart. On the day the bow was fully repaired, a light rain fell over Willow Creek. Silas handed the perfectly restored bow back to her. It's done. She took the bow, her fingers tracing the barely visible crack, her eyes growing a little hot. Thank you. When do you plan to leave? He asked. She froze for a moment. He was right. The bow was fixed, and it was time for her to leave. Yet, for some unknown reason, she felt a trace of reluctance in her heart. In a couple of days, she said. He nodded and didn't say anything else. That night, she played her violin. The melodious sound of the strings echoed through the rainy night, carrying far into the distance. She played her mother's favorite piece, which was also the piece she had played countless times for Carter. But this time, she was playing it solely for herself. When the song ended, she heard a knock on the door. Opening it, she found Silas standing in the rain, holding an oiled paper umbrella. "You played well," he said. Then, he handed her something. It was a tuberose carved out of wood. The craftsmanship was exquisite and incredibly lifelike. "For you," he said. "Why, consider it payment," he said, averting his gaze. "That piece you played was beautiful." She took the carved wooden tuberose. It still carried the warmth of his fingertips, and her heart skipped a beat. Carter found her eventually. He appeared at the entrance of Silas's estate on a morning just after the rain. At that moment, she was playing chess with Silas in the courtyard. The moment she saw Carter, the calm lake of her heart rippled once more. He had lost a lot of weight and looked extremely haggard. A rough stubble covered his jaw, and his expensive suit was worn and wrinkled. Those eyes, which had always been filled with impatience and disgust in the past, were now bloodshot. He stared at her intently, his eyes surging with intense emotions she couldn't understand. "Chloe," he began, his voice terribly hoarse. Silas lifted his eyelids to glance at him, then placed a chess piece on the board. "Checkmate," he said to her. She snapped back to reality and looked down at the chessboard. Her king was completely trapped. Ignoring Silas, Carter walked toward her step by step. "Chloe, come back with me." There was a hint of pleading in his tone. She didn't look at him. Instead, she said to Silas, "I lost." "You haven't lost," Silas said faintly, looking at Carter across from them. "Hasn't your reinforcement arrived?" Only then did she notice Lily trailing behind Carter. Seeing her, Lily immediately rushed forward, trying to grab her hand. "Chloe, please come back with us. Uncle Fletcher is worried sick." Chloe stepped sideways to dodge her. Carter's face darkened. He yanked Lily behind him. "This has nothing to do with you." His voice was as cold as ice. Lily's face instantly turned deathly pale. Carter didn't spare Lily another glance. He just stared stubbornly at Chloe. "Chloe, I know I was wrong. I remember everything now. I was a bastard in my past life. I let you down. The day of the car crash, when I pushed you away, it wasn't to repay a debt, it was because I loved you. I just didn't know how to say it. Chloe, please give me another chance, okay?" Every word he spoke felt like a bomb exploding in her head. He had been reborn too, just not with complete memories like her. But even so what? The Chloe who had been hurt by him for 10 years and had died for him was already gone. Standing here now was a reborn Chloe, one who only wanted to live for herself. She raised her head, meeting his hopeful gaze. "Carter," she said calmly, "everything from our past life is in the past. I don't hate you anymore. And I don't love you anymore either. Just go. And don't ever come looking for me again." Her words were like the sharpest blade, completely severing any lingering hope he had. His body shook violently, and the last shred of light in his eyes went out. In the end, Carter left. Like a soulless puppet, he let Lily support him as he walked away step by step. Watching his desolate figure, a myriad of emotions washed over her. To say she didn't hate him would be a lie, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of relief. The toxic fate that had entangled them across 2 lifetimes had finally come to an end at this very moment. Silas had walked up to her at some point. He handed her a cup of hot tea. "It's all over." She took the tea, nodded, and murmured, "Yes, it's all over." From that day on, Carter never appeared again. Chloe stayed in Willow Creek, renting a small cottage with a courtyard right next door to Silas. Like any ordinary couple, they cooked together, went on walks together, and watched the sunrise and sunset side by side. He taught her how to tell good wood from bad, and she taught him how to use the latest trendy electronic products. He still spoke very little, but his gaze toward her was always filled with warmth. He would remember when she casually mentioned liking the pastries from a certain bakery and buy them for her the very next day. He would quietly sit next to her while she practiced her violin. When her period cramps left her, sweating and in agonizing pain, he would awkwardly brew brown sugar water for her and keep a worried watch by her side. Her heart, amidst these plain yet warm daily routines, was slowly filled and healed piece by piece. Only then did she realize that loving someone wasn't about humble supplication, but equal protection. It wasn't about desperate, exhausting demands, but quiet, gentle giving. A year later, on an evening when the tuberoses were in full bloom, Silas proposed to her. There was no diamond ring, no bouquet of flowers. He simply handed her a violin that he had crafted with his own hands for her. Inscribed on the backplate of the violin was a single sentence: Chloe and Silas, safe and at peace for a lifetime. Looking at him, she smiled as tears streamed down her face. I do. Silas and Chloe held a simple wedding ceremony in Willow Creek. They didn't invite any friends or family. It was just the two of them. Under the old locust tree in the courtyard, they exchanged rings, a pair of rings carved from the exact same piece of wood with their names hand-carved onto them. Their married life was peaceful and happy. Together, they tended to the flowers and plants in the courtyard, experimented with new recipes, and went on field trips into the mountains. Silas's fame grew larger by the day, and many people traveled from afar, begging him to make them a violin. But he only made one violin a year and never broke his rule. He said his time and effort had to be reserved for the most important person and things. Chloe knew that the most important person was her. A few years later, her father passed away, and she went back home for the funeral. Silas accompanied her the entire way. At the funeral, Chloe saw Carter. He looked much older than the last time she had seen him. His temples were already graying. He just stood far away, not coming forward. It wasn't until all the guests had dispersed that he finally walked up to her. My condolences, he said, his voice still hoarse. She nodded in response. There were no extra words between them. After handling her father's funeral affairs, Chloe inherited all of the Winslow family's businesses. She didn't return to manage them herself. Instead, she hired a team of professional managers. She and Silas continued to live in Willow Creek. Later, she would hear intermittent news about Carter from her best friend. He never married for the rest of his life, nor did he ever have any further involvement with Lily. He grew the Fletcher Group into an industry giant, yet he lived like an ascetic monk, with no one close by his side. Some people said that a woman always lived in his heart, a lover he had lost. Whenever she heard these things, Chloe's heart remained completely undisturbed. Those were all matters of a past life. Chloe and Silas stayed by each other's side in Willow Creek for a lifetime. He spoiled her like a child, and she, in turn, thawed his cold exterior, transforming him from a piece of icy jade into a warm one. He would secretly kiss her forehead after she fell asleep, and she would quietly hand him a cup of hot tea while he was deeply immersed in crafting his violins. They never had children, but they had each other, a courtyard full of flowers, and the melodious sound of the violin. She was deeply satisfied with such a life. On an early autumn afternoon, the year she turned 80, Chloe lay in the rocking chair in the courtyard, and accompanied by the beautiful sound of Silas's violin, peacefully closed her eyes. After she passed away, Silas followed her final wishes and buried her on the hill out back, on the slope covered in blooming tuberoses. He placed her most cherished violin, along with the antique bow he had repaired for her, into a case and mailed it back to the old Winslow family estate. The person who signed for the package was a white-haired old man. The butler said it was Mr. Fletcher. He had bought a villa directly across from the old Winslow estate and had lived there for decades. Every day, he would sit by the window, gazing in the direction of the Winslow house, sitting there for the entire day. He took the violin case and stood at the door, holding it for a very, very long time. It was said that he passed away that very night. When he died, he was still holding tightly onto that violin case, as if it were the ultimate resting place of his entire life. That's a wrap. Chloe finally found her peace with Silas, leaving Carter to his regrets. Remember, it's never too late to walk away and choose yourself. Let me know your thoughts below, and see you next time.